Good afternoon to those of you who have joined a bit early. We appreciate that. I just wanted to say hello, and we'll start this workshop probably 2 or 3 minutes after 4 o'clock. Thanks again for joining. Good afternoon. Welcome to this workshop. We will start in a couple of minutes. People are still connecting in, and as soon as we have critical mass, we'll begin. Thank you so much. We are going to go ahead and begin our workshop. Welcome to this virtual workshop for advancing 30 by 30, climate smart lands, and equitable access to open space, parks, and nature. This workshop is being conducted by the California Natural Resources Agency, or CNRA for short. And it is part of a series that has included 9 regional workshops across California. And this is our 9th one. Today, as you know, we are in the San Diego region, and we are excited to have you join us, and we look forward to collaborating with you during this workshop. My name is Joan Isaacson, and I'm one of the facilitators for today. We want to start out with a few important housekeeping items, all of which are geared towards optimizing involvement for all of our participants. This workshop is being recorded, and it'll be available for further viewing, as well as being posted on the website for the project, which is www.californianature.ca.gov. You'll hear us mention the website address several times during today's workshop. We're also streaming the workshop live on the CNRA YouTube page. This meeting is being interpreted in 4 languages: Spanish, Vietnamese, Cantonese, and Mandarin. If you need interpretation services, please provide your language in the chat or raise your hand with the raise hand function by clicking the reactions button. And if you're listening in on a phone, please dial *9. In order to access the audio channel for any of these languages, please click the interpretation button, which is a little globe icon in the Zoom taskbar. And this button will appear after I give further instructions on translation. These instructions will be repeated in all languages, and then you will be able to join the audio channel for that language. Again, at the end of these instructions, the interpretation button will appear in the toolbar, and you'll be able to select the language for your interpretation. We'll now invite our interpreters to repeat these instructions in language. And first, we'll hear from Victor Hernandez, our interpreter for Spanish.
Thank you, Joan. Muy buenas tardes. Le queremos dejar saber que esta reunión será interpretada en el español, el vietnamita, cantonés y mandarín. Para poder acceder al canal de audio de cualquiera de estos idiomas, usted tendrá que hacer clic en el botón de interpretación, que es el icono del globo, es decir, un símbolo del mundo que le va a aparecer en la barra de tareas de la plataforma de Zoom. Aparecerá entonces un menú y entonces podrá usted seleccionar el idioma que necesite. Este mensaje se va a repetir en todos los idiomas y luego a continuación podrá unirse al canal de audio para ese idioma. La interpretación entonces comenzará a final de este mensaje. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. And next we'll hear from our Vietnamese interpreter, Tiffany Tong.
Thank you, Joan. Xin chào quý vị. Chào mừng quý vị đến với hội thảo khu vực trực tuyến về những giải pháp dựa vào thiên nhiên. Xin đưa ra bất kỳ câu hỏi nào về kỹ thuật mà quý vị có vào khung hội thoại. Nếu quý vị cần các dịch vụ thông dịch, xin ghi rõ tên ngôn ngữ của quý vị vào khung hội thoại và chúng tôi sẽ đáp ứng nhu cầu của quý vị. Quý vị có thể chú ý thấy rằng nhóm chúng tôi sử dụng chức năng giơ tay, raise hands, bằng cách nhấn vào nút phản hồi reaction để tham gia hội thảo bằng tiếng Tây Ban Nha, tiếng Việt, tiếng phổ thông hay tiếng quan thoại. Xin nhấn nút thông dịch ở cuối màn hình của quý vị, có hình quả địa cầu. Sau đó xin chọn ngôn ngữ của quý vị. Cảm ơn quý vị rất là nhiều. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany. And next we'll hear from Kathy Wu. She's our Mandarin interpreter.
大家下午好，我的名字是 Kathy Wu， 我将会为这个会议做国语同声传译。需要中文翻译，请用口译的按钮，是一个地球仪的样子，在你屏幕下面的任务栏 Taskbar。国语选 Mandarin， 广东话选 Cantonese。想要看英文字幕，用 CC 在任务栏下面。谢谢 ，Thank you。
Thank you. And next we'll hear from our Cantonese interpreter, Wei Tang.
Thank you, John. 本會議將會翻譯成為西班牙語、越南文、廣東話同埋國語、普通話4種語言。要使用以上任何一種語言嘅語音頻道咧，請單擊螢幕下方任務欄嘅口譯功能按鈕Interpretation。個樣咧就有啲係似一個地球嘅圖標嘅，然後咧就會出現咧係選項單。請從中選取廣東話 Cantonese。呢個信息結束之後咧，係將要啟動呢個口譯功能。唔該咧，係作出你嘅選擇，然後咧就係會係開始即時嘅傳譯嘅。我哋喺呢個廣東話嘅頻道裏邊係再見。Thank you.
Thank you. We thank all of our interpreters. We couldn't do these meetings without you. We really appreciate all that you do. We now invite our participants to join the interpretation audio channels. Please click the interpretation button in your toolbar. Again, it's that little globe icon in the Zoom taskbar. I also want to let you know that closed captioning is available during this workshop. And if you'd like to use this option, you can click the closed caption icon in the Zoom taskbar, and then select subtitles to view subtitles that move across the screen. You can also select live transcript, which gives you a full transcript in the side panel. Because of the large number of participants in these virtual workshops, which we are very grateful for, participants will generally be muted during the workshop, and will be participating primarily by polling. No video is required. And at any time, if you need technical assistance, please contact one of our awesome technical support team members by using the chat button on the Zoom taskbar. I also want to let you know that during the workshop, relevant links will be shared through the chat feature. So you're going to want to keep your eye on the chat box in order to make sure that you get all the information. You can also request technical assistance by using the raise hand function. If you have a latest version of Zoom, click on reactions in the Zoom taskbar and then select raise your hand. Otherwise, raise hand will already be visible in the Zoom taskbar at the bottom of your screen or at the bottom of the participants tab. And if you're on phone, again, you just have to dial *9. Because we have a large number of people participating today, both virtually via the webinar and by phone, we want to make this workshop as productive as possible for everyone. As we move through the workshop, we ask that you follow some tips to keep this a productive session. Please be respectful to each other and the workshop agenda and objectives. Threatening, profane, or inappropriate language is not allowed, and disruptive participants will be removed from the workshop. Thank you, and we invite your cooperation in making this a productive meeting for everyone. Now, I'm going to turn to making some introductions. Facilitating today's workshop with me are Jenna Torget and Debbie Schechter. And then joining us from the California Natural Resources Agency are Jennifer Norris, the Deputy Secretary for Biodiversity and Habitat, Amanda Hansen, Deputy Secretary for Climate Change, and Mark Gold, Deputy Secretary for Oceans and Coastal Policy and Executive Director for the Ocean Protection Council. These 9 regional workshops are designed to ensure that the state hears from a broad cross-section of stakeholders with vital interests and how California achieves our goals for conserving 30% of our lands and coastal waters by 2030, accelerating nature-based climate solutions, and advancing equitable access to nature for all. The specific objectives for today's workshop are threefold and noted on the slide screen right there for you. They are providing an overview of nature-based solutions and relevant action items in Governor Newsom's Executive Order N8220, introducing the Natural and Working Lands Climate Smart Strategy and Pathways to 30 by 30 with equity considerations throughout, and importantly, hearing from you, gaining regional perspectives and ideas for the San Diego region. In the workshop today, we'll spend about 40 minutes providing you with updates, and then the rest of the time will be focused on conducting polling activities aimed to gather your insights, your experiences, and your ideas. After brief presentations by Secretary Wade Crowfoot, Jennifer Norris, Amanda Hansen, and Mark Gold, we will kick off the public engagement portion of the meeting with a poll to learn about you and your priorities for the San Diego region. We'll then break out into 3 smaller groups to engage in interactive polling, asking a range of questions on a variety of topics. I'll tell you, these breakout sessions go by quickly. So we ask that when you respond to polling, if you can keep your responses as concise as possible, and that makes sure that everyone gets a chance to contribute. We want and need your experiences and ideas as we work together to create substantive long-term strategies that the state will implement to achieve the 30 by 30 and climate smart land goals. Now, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Norris to share a tribal acknowledgement.
Thanks, Joan. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Jennifer Norris, Deputy Secretary for Biodiversity and Habitat at the California Natural Resources Agency. I would like to start today by acknowledging the importance of tribal communities in this process. Our tribal partners are integral to achieving the goals set forth in the governor's executive order. We know that by working together, we can further safeguard the environment, preserve tribal cultural practices, and strengthen relationships between the state and tribal nations. The Resources Agency is currently engaging tribes through government-to-government consultation. In addition, we will be holding tribal listening sessions to engage tribes, solicit tribal input, and most importantly, explore opportunities to collaborate. We look forward to working with our tribal partners, and we encourage those who would like to connect with us on tribal perspectives to visit our website to see a schedule of the listening sessions. Please visit our website at www.resources.ca.gov. I would also like to acknowledge any elected officials that joined today. Thank you so much for your participation. Public engagement is critically important to the state, even as we continue to navigate the COVID-19 pandemic. And we know that virtual meetings are not the ideal way to have a conversation, but we didn't want to delay this important work on 30 by 30 and climate smart lands. So while this isn't exactly how we envisioned, we do hope these meetings can be productive and positive for everyone involved. Collaboration is essential to achieving the goals outlined in the executive order. So as we begin our conversations today, I want to underscore our commitment to engaging all voices, all perspectives, and to advancing equity in everything we do. We begin today with opening remarks from Wade Crowfoot, Secretary of the California Natural Resources Agency, which protects and manages California's natural resources, including our forests, rivers and waterways, coast and ocean, fish and wildlife, and energy. Now here's Secretary Crowfoot.
I'm Wade Crowfoot, our California Natural Resources Secretary. Welcome and thank you for joining one of 9 virtual regional workshops to advance nature-based solutions across our state. Last fall, Governor Newsom issued an executive order that elevated the role of nature in both combating climate change, maintaining and protecting our biological diversity, and achieving more equitable access to our outdoors. In our agency, the Natural Resources Agency, we're really excited about the governor's leadership that's, of course, matched by our legislature on expanding environmental conservation across our state to achieve these multiple objectives. We live in a remarkable state, known around the world for our natural diversity of plants and animals, topographies, ecosystems, and our cultural diversity, where we are succeeding and thriving across all conceivable differences within our human species. The work that you'll be involved in and the input you provide will ensure that looking forward in coming years and decades, we craft smart, ambitious, but achievable strategies to expand environmental conservation and utilize nature in the fight against climate change. In that executive order that Governor Newsom issued last fall, he called for conserving 30% of our state's land and coastal waters by 2030, which we call the 30 by 30 target. He also called for the development of a climate smart land strategy so we can understand how we better manage both our natural and working lands to both remove carbon from the atmosphere and protect people and nature from the impacts of climate change. The best ideas we have and the most effective actions will achieve multiple benefits. At the same time, combating climate change, preserving biodiversity, and expanding recreational and outdoor access for all Californians. We know there are no one-size-fits-all solutions from Sacramento for this work, and our regions are so different in both the challenges they face and the opportunities they offer, that these regional workshops are really critical to help us understand what is the situation in your part of California? What are critical priorities in this area that we need to address? What are challenges you face to environmental conservation and climate action and equitable access? And importantly, what are opportunities for our state agency and more importantly, our state government to help you seize these opportunities in your region to expand equitable, thoughtful, sustainable, balanced environmental conservation? So we're really excited with your participation and look forward to these regional workshops figuring in and informing both a strategy for the achievement of the 30 by 30 target and our climate smart land strategy coming up in recent months. Really appreciate all that you do in your own lives on these important topics, and very excited to hear from you today and in coming weeks and months. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I am Amanda Hansen, Deputy Secretary for Climate Change at the Natural Resources Agency, and I'm going to provide some background on why Governor Newsom issued an executive order on nature-based solutions, what nature-based solutions are and why they matter, and the deliverables that Secretary Crowfoot teed up as the focus of our workshop today. I will talk a little bit about the Natural and Working Lands Climate Smart Strategy, and then I'll hand it off to Jen to talk about our 30 by 30 effort. Climate change and biodiversity loss are among the top 5 threats humanity will face in the next 10 years. As we know all too well, California is not immune to these crises. Last year alone, historic wildfires burned over 4 million acres in California. Lives were lost, homes and businesses were destroyed, public health suffered from hazardous air quality, and nature we treasure is gone. These fires took place in the middle of a deadly pandemic and heat wave, and on the heels of the most extreme drought in the state's history. California is considered one of the world's 36 biodiversity hotspots because of its high concentration of unique species that are also experiencing unprecedented threats, including climate change. The governor issued the executive order in direct response to these threats and outlined a comprehensive and results-oriented nature-based solutions agenda for California, which brings us to what are nature-based solutions and why are they important? When we talk about nature-based solutions, we're talking about actions that work with and enhance nature to help address societal challenges. And they're important because they provide so many benefits, many of which we depend on for our very well-being. This slide shows a few examples of nature-based solutions that address climate change and protect biodiversity. The circular image you see in the middle is an example of community greening, a suite of nature-based solutions that can cool communities facing extreme heat, reduce energy costs, allow soils to better absorb water, expand access to nature, enhance biodiversity, reduce the impacts of pollution, and increase quality of life. The top right image shows wetlands and riparian areas which can sequester carbon, reduce flood risk, filter pollution, and protect habitat. The middle right image is an example of an agricultural nature-based solution. This hedgerow supports pollinators, improves habitat, conserves water, enhances our food supply, and contributes to our economic prosperity. And finally, the lower right image speaks to the many benefits nature-based climate solutions in our forests deliver to California. Healthy forests reduce the threat of catastrophic wildfire and serve as a carbon sink. They also capture and clean our water supply, improve air quality, provide habitat for wildlife, and support local economies. I'm going to briefly outline our goals for the Natural and Working Lands Climate Smart Strategy and explore how it might support your region's economic, environmental, and equity priorities. Natural and working lands is the term we use in California to describe the nature-based solutions sector, which consists of the iconic landscapes we know and love, our forests, wetlands and beaches, croplands, community green spaces, grasslands, deserts, and more. These lands cover 90% of the state's 104 million acres. While our lands offer significant opportunity to meet California's climate goals, they've been a missing piece of our climate agenda. And the Natural and Working Lands Climate Smart Strategy is intended to close this gap. We're excited to align relevant existing state efforts under one cohesive strategy and identify land management actions that help us protect vulnerable communities, achieve carbon neutrality, improve public health and safety, and expand economic opportunity. We want to learn about nature-based solutions that are important to you and how our statewide strategy can support your priorities. For example, sea level rise is projected to have significant consequences for the region's coastal communities, such as dangerous and costly flooding with disproportionate impacts on vulnerable communities. Are there nature-based solutions that can reduce these risks, such as wetland restoration, living shorelines, or stormwater parks? The science points to significant temperature increases in the San Diego region, particularly inland areas. Are there nature-based climate solutions you feel important to reduce risks from and build resilience to extreme heat, such as community greening, green roofs, or green streets? Coastal tourism, recreation, and agricultural production are threatened by climate change. Are there actions the state strategy can prioritize to support these sectors in adapting to climate change in the San Diego region? Are there nature-based climate solutions you are successfully deploying that should be amplified in the state strategy? Finally, are there careers in the natural and working land sector you'd like to elevate in the San Diego region, such as coastal restoration technicians, community foresters, or carbon farmers? Really excited to hear from you. Thank you for your time. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Jen Norris.
Thanks, Amanda. Again, everyone, I'm Jennifer Norris, and I am running point on the state's 30 by 30 initiative. So as you've heard, our goal is to conserve 30% of our lands and coastal waters by 2030. And we want to do so in a manner that protects biodiversity, combats climate change, increases access to nature, and safeguards our economic sustainability and food supply. We want to be purposeful in our approach. We want to conserve places that effectively protect the biological diversity of California, our unique plants and animals. We want to conserve lands and waters that meaningfully address climate change in the ways that Amanda outlined. And we want to conserve in a way that provides equitable access to nature and its benefits, like clean water, clean air, climate resilience, and of course, recreation. So what kinds of places are we talking about? Here are some examples from this region. Probably familiar to most of you, Anza Borrego State Park. Covering more than 600,000 acres, Anza Borrego is a great place for hiking, camping, wind caves, and wildflowers. Nearly 2/3 of the park is pristine wilderness, sheltering an astonishing proliferation of plant and animal life, including the endangered peninsular bighorn sheep. Our Rancho Jumul Ecological Reserve. At 5,600 acres, This reserve is an important component of San Diego's multi-species conservation plan, and it supports large areas of coastal sage scrub, annual grasslands, and riparian habitat. It provides connections to federal and local conservation areas, as well as tribal lands, and supports multiple threatened and endangered species, including the tricolored blackbird and golden eagle. And finally, Tijuana River Mouth State Marine Conservation Area. This 3 square mile reserve and the adjacent Tijuana River National Estuarine Research Reserve together form one of the largest protected estuarine marine complexes in Southern California. Over 370 species of birds use the area, including marbled godwits, California least terns, and western snowy plovers. Designated to conserve marine life and habitat, this area allows managed recreational and commercial take of coastal finfish like mackerel and sardines. Achieving 30 by 30 will rely on the protection of diverse places like this across the state. As good conservation can happen on every conceivable land type and through lots of different strategies. And as the Secretary said, one size does not fit all. At the end of the day, conservation happens locally, so we need to work together. By February 2022, we will deliver our Pathways to 30 by 30 document, which will identify opportunities and strategies to achieve 30 by 30. It will also identify challenges to meeting our goals. This document is intended to set us on the path to successful implementation of 30 by 30. Today, we want to hear from you about your region and get your perspective on what those opportunities and challenges are. We're interested to know how you think we should go about achieving 30 by 30. Which strategies to conserve lands and coastal waters are most effective in this region? We want to invest in successful approaches. Tell us what those are. At the same time, we'd like to know which strategies are more challenging and why, so we can work to address gaps. Your insights today will be used to develop our document and to help us define what does conservation mean in California. You'll be asked later to share what conservation looks like to you. The executive order called for the establishment of this collaborative approach in recognition of the fact that partners across the state have experience and expertise that we can learn from. This conversation is the beginning of what we hope is an ongoing partnership. 30 by 30 isn't a new mandate, and it won't be accomplished from Sacramento down. By sharing your insights with us, we hope to learn how to be more effective partners. Our ultimate goal is for 30 by 30 to become what is called an open source movement for people across the state from a diverse array of sectors to commit to achieving 30 by 30 and work with us in partnership. Thank you again for being here. I really look forward to hearing your ideas. Now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Mark Gold.
Thanks, Jen. Great to see such a good turnout this afternoon from the San Diego region. I'm glad to be here today as we focus on some of the most pressing issues facing California's efforts to protect our natural habitats, combat climate change, and ensure biodiversity in this great state. For those of you not familiar with the Ocean Protection Council, we have a mission to ensure that California maintains healthy, resilient, and productive ocean and coastal ecosystems. OPC works across various state agencies to coordinate activities related to ocean protection, and we also establish policies that facilitate the collection and sharing of scientific data, as well as identify policy areas that need to be addressed at both the state and federal levels. State waters run from the tide lines to 3 miles out, and 16% of California's coastal waters are part of the statewide marine protected area network. There are 124 MPAs in that network. 9% of state coastal marine waters are protected through no-take reserves, and another 7% are limited commercial and or recreational take MPAs. The MPA network is approaching a decadal review of this program by the end of 2022, and currently, we are not looking at potential MPA expansion as part of the 30 by 30 path for the ocean, nor will we look at expanding MPAs at all until after the completion of the MPA network decadal review? Our coastal regions and ocean are important ecosystems that are not only places where species thrive, but also serve as main attractions for California residents and visitors who want to enjoy the sand, water, and features of our coastline. These areas are also integral to our economy with aquaculture, energy generation, and the network of ports up and down the state that are essential to the movements of goods in and out of California, the entire nation, and the Pacific. Climate change threatens the coast and ocean with rising sea levels and ocean acidification, while other coastal resources suffer from the impacts of water pollution, harmful algae blooms, and habitat loss. We must take steps now to prevent further erosion of the coast and loss of rocky intertidal habitats, wetlands, and beaches. Also, the loss of kelp forests and the loss of marine life. In order to develop the path to 30 by 30 for coastal waters, stakeholder engagement will be critical to better define what conservation means for California's coastal zone and waters. As examples, California has 34 areas of special biological significance identified, 3 national estuary programs, 3 national estuarine research reserves, including the Tijuana River Estuary, and 4 national marine sanctuaries that are critical for conservation. Most of these areas have additional conservation measures such as oil, gas, and mineral extraction bans in marine sanctuaries, and pollution discharge limits in areas of special biological significance. We can look at these areas as potential candidates for additional conservation measures. Overall, this planning effort will enable California to develop practical and scientifically based strategies that will get us to 30 by 30 for our coastal regions and ocean waters. Thank you. And now back to Jen.
Thanks, Mark. So if you watched our January webinar, you know that we have been working with Esri on a geospatial information system called CA-Nature. This system is being designed to be a publicly accessible suite of interactive mapping and visualization tools. CA-Nature will bring together maps of biodiversity, climate change, and access so that we can view and analyze different features of the landscape in one place. This system will allow us to identify places across California where we have the opportunity to achieve our biodiversity, climate, and equity goals. We will use CA-Nature to assess what percentage of California is already conserved and track progress toward our goal. We are currently developing CA-Nature using authoritative statewide data that we currently use or have access to. But of course, this is only the first version. We expect to expand this system over time, integrating new data that reflects changes in our understanding and knowledge. Some of you have been asking how you can provide your data for use in CA-Nature. I'm happy to tell you that we now have a submission form on our website where you can provide information about the data you want us to consider for future versions. We are most interested in statewide information that meets our program objectives and meets strong scientific, data, and documentation standards. So stay tuned for future updates on CA-Nature. It's going to be pretty cool. And now I'll turn it back over to Debbie.
Thanks, Jen. As you've heard from Amanda, Jen, and Mark, the state has been busy since Governor Newsom issued the executive order. Let's zoom out and look at where we've been and where we're going next. Since Governor Newsom issued the executive order last October, the California Natural Resources Agency and its partner agencies have made some important progress towards developing these strategies. In January, a kickoff webinar was hosted by the state that drew in over 800 interested parties. Also in January, the state began a formal consultation process with California Native American tribes, and we continue to host tribal listening sessions. We've been engaging with interested parties and stakeholders from around the state to hear perspectives and insights related to these efforts. In April, the state launched a website to serve as a portal to learn and engage in developing the Pathways to 30 by 30 and Natural and Working Lands Climate Smart Strategy. We also released a public input questionnaire to gather experiences and ideas from a broad cross-section of Californians. And today, as you've heard, is the last of 9 regional workshops to gain input and perspectives. This summer, CNRA will convene several topical advisory panels to address key questions. Each advisory panel will produce a summary document that gives context to their topic area, offers technical or other insights, and provides key recommendations. Topics will include issues related to climate change, biodiversity, defining conservation, and equitable approaches to this work. The panel will present their recommendations in virtual workshops. We'll use the information gathered in the drafting of the Climate Smart Land Strategy document, which will be released this summer for public review and input. This important document will be finalized and delivered in October as we begin the next phase of this effort. Throughout the fall, we'll host another series of virtual engagements to update the public on our progress and invite more participation. And we'll also be drafting and releasing the other strategy document, Pathways to 30 by 30, for public review and comment. This document will be finalized and delivered in February 2022. To support this effort, we've launched a new website, californianature.ca.gov, to serve as the portal of information about advancing 30 by 30 and climate smart lands. This website features information about the executive order, how nature-based solutions work, ways to get involved through regional workshops and other events, as well as a place to share your insights. As you've heard, we launched an interactive public input questionnaire, which is designed to solicit input to be used in developing the 2 main strategy documents that will guide the work we must do as a state. Responses to this questionnaire are welcome until May 14th. And we want you to stay in touch. Please contact us, ask questions, or provide your experiences and ideas through email, regular mail, or voicemail. And now I'll turn it over to Jenna Torget for the Exploring the Region segment of this workshop.
Thank you, Debbie. We're moving on to the portion of today's workshop that focuses in on perspectives in the San Diego region and provides an opportunity for the public to participate in the process. So today's regional workshop is, of course, in the San Diego region. We are bordered by the inland desert regions to the east, Los Angeles to the north, and Mexico to the south. The San Diego region supports a population of 3.3 million, which makes it the 4th largest population in the state, despite being the smallest in terms of land area. The region supports 1.4 million jobs. In addition to extensive beach access along the coastline, the San Diego region also contains a diverse range of natural lands, including desert, mountains, and estuaries. The San Diego region brings in 1.8 billion from agriculture annually, with the leading commodities represented by nursery plants, flowers, and avocados. As you know, the San Diego region is especially rich in natural lands. The region's land cover is primarily shrub and chaparral at just over half of the total. Settlements and desert areas comprise another quarter of the area, while trees, grasslands, croplands, wetlands, and shore ocean make up the rest. The region has relatively low groundwater recharge potential. About half of the region is privately owned, while the state of California owns about 23%. We wanted to provide this regional snapshot before we dive further into our meeting. Your perspective will be important as we move into the next section, where we will engage with you and gather your input on a series of questions that will be used in developing strategies. So to get your experiences and ideas, we'll be using a software called Poll Everywhere, and there will be 3 ways to participate. The first is by computer. You can participate on your computer by opening a browser and going to www.pollev.com/kwpoll1. You can copy and paste this link from the chat box, and it's also on your screen here as well. You can also go on your smartphone by opening a browser and going to the same address, www.pollev.com/kwpoll1. And from your phone or your computer, you can also use text by sending a text to the number 22333 with the word KWPOLL1. That's KWPOLL with the number 1 at the end. And it will be a text chain where you can provide your input as well. I'll let you know when to use these different options. When we go into breakout rooms, we'll also be using Poll Everywhere as well. So this option, this software of Poll Everywhere lets us save your answers behind the scenes. And so we can actually gather the input from you and have the information on the back end too. And it helps us discern the direction and inform the direction of this initiative. So we really appreciate your engagement on this. Let our tech team know if you have any issues, but there are 3 ways to participate. Before we move on to the next slide, there are questions on the next slide that are in a word cloud format. If you're typing 2 words, do an underscore between the 2 words, and that way we can see them pop up as one term. So I'll have us go on to the next slide, and it's our first question. And the question is, where are you located? Where are you located? So you can do it through your browser. And I see someone put the underscore between the 2. That's wonderful. So I see Menlo Park, San Diego, Encinitas, San Marcos, Central San Diego, Temecula, Ventura, Point Loma, Pacific Beach, Claremont, Coronado, folks joining us from Los Angeles, from Chula Vista, Pacific Grove, Lemon Grove, Del Mar. Looks like a lot of people participating from La Jolla, San Diego, Encinitas, Escondido. Some from Poway. Wonderful. Let's take another 5 seconds or so on this slide before we go on to the next. It's good to see the diversity of where folks are joining us from within the region and from outside as well. All right, so let's move on to our next question. Our next question is, what sector do you represent? So A is government, federal, state, and local. B is tribal government or tribal community. C is business, investor, labor. D is non-government or community-based organization. E, academic. F, general public. And looking from response here, we have a lot of folks joining us, about half from NGOs, non-government or community-based organizations. We also have good representation from federal, state, local government, folks joining us from the business investor community, from academia, members of the general public, as well as tribal government or tribal community. I'd say the higher representation is from non-government or CBO and government, federal, state, and local. Okay, so let's move us on to our third question. Our third question, remember to do the underscore between two words, two or more words. When you think about nature or special places in this region, what comes to mind? You think about nature or special places in this region, what comes to mind? As a reminder, if you haven't gotten to the poll yet, you can copy and paste it from the chat box or text the number on the screen as well. All right. So I see biodiversity, diversity, sage, scrub, the lagoons, the beach, the desert, oceans, marine areas, coastal areas. It gets a little small here, but what we can see popping out still is biodiversity, scrub, wetlands. I'm thinking coastal scrub, the chaparral, diversity. Wonderful. Let's take another 5 seconds or so on this slide here as folks' responses are coming in. If you don't see it on the screen, it did get a little small, but if you don't see it on the screen, just know it's captured by Poll Everywhere. And we appreciate your responses here. I'll move us on to the next here. And I want to first thank everyone for your active participation in the plenary session of this meeting. A key goal of this meeting here is to further invite your input to help inform the development of the natural land climate smart strategy and the 30 by 30 pathways document. We have such a large number of participants, and so we're going to transition into breakout groups so that your participation and input can be most effectively captured. So in this breakout session, we'll be asking you to provide your experiences and ideas in 3 areas regarding regional interests and current efforts, regional challenges, and regional opportunities. So participants who requested interpretation upon registration will remain in this main room here. Because you will be staying here, you will not get a prompt to join the breakout room. So that's specifically for folks who requested interpretation. Other folks will be randomly assigned to breakout room 1, breakout room 2, and a large number of you will also stay in this main room as well. So if you receive a breakout invitation in the next, after I mention it in a minute, definitely accept that breakout invitation. So we'll be capturing your input in 2 breakout rooms similarly to how we've done in this plenary session. And recognizing that the questions will be high level and we're asking you to share brief responses. We're hoping to get some common themes from your responses. And our intent is also to provide an opportunity for you to see and reflect on other people's responses as well. Following these workshops, the facilitation team will compile all of the responses to all of the questions and prepare a meeting summary containing a synthesis of common themes. All responses will be treated equally and will be included in the meeting summary appendices. And remember, there's a public input questionnaire that is running parallel to the regional workshops. It's intended to provide you and members of the community and the public with a more detailed opportunity to provide targeted input to inform the development of the 30 by 30 pathways document and the natural and working lands climate smart strategy. So for this room again, we'll have a lot of people who joined the webinar, people who are using the interpretation lines, and our phone call-in users. So if you're a phone call-in user, you won't receive an invitation for a breakout room. So stay in here with us. And for the rest who are going to your breakout rooms, I want everyone to just take 5 seconds or so and close your browser window with Poll Everywhere. And then type the word, if you texted in your responses in Poll Everywhere, type in the word leave, L-E-A-V-E. we're going to get new links to Poll Everywhere in the breakout rooms. And in order to see your responses on the screen in your breakout room, you have to be in this new window with the new links. So the easiest way is to close that browser window, type leave into your text chain, and we'll start fresh in our breakout rooms. If you're staying in this main room here, still close the window, still type leave. We will be getting a new link in this room as well. Okay, so we're going to send you to your breakout rooms. If you get the invitation, click join, and we'll see you there in a few minutes. I'll be staying here, but for those of you leaving, we'll see you later. All right, I see people heading out into the different rooms. If you haven't done so already, close your browser window with Poll Everywhere and type leave into your text. Okay, so I see Amanda is here with us in our room. Amanda, good to see you. Okay. So in this main room here, I have a little monologue to give at the beginning to make sure that everyone can provide input, whether they're a phone-only call-in user receiving interpretation or a webinar user as well. So if you can sit tight for a minute, I'm going to share some important information and then we'll dive into the questions. So we're going to talk about the regional interests, current efforts, and challenges and opportunities. But in this room here too, we will be accommodating phone-only and non-English speaking participants. And as a reminder, we are still recording this session. We're streaming it live on YouTube for others to view at a later time. And then also as a reminder, our interpretation services are still available. So if you joined late, you can look for interpretation instructions in the chat. So again, my name is Jenna Tourget. I'll be your facilitator during this session. So at any time, if you encounter technical issues, you can call or text 619-890-5955. You can also reach out in the chat box as well to our technical support team, and we can help you out in that area as well. Okay, so we recognize that there are folks who are calling in by phone who might not have an option of participating by computer. So we've designed this room to collect phone-only responses verbally or by text. We encourage text responses because it gives us a better opportunity to gather your input and more thoroughly capture what your input is as well. But if you are calling in by phone, as we ask the different questions and you need to provide your response, you can raise your hand by dialing *9. So raise your hand by dialing *9. I'll unmute participants in the order of the hands raised. We'll tell you how to mute yourself as well. So if you are a phone call-in user and we do ask a question, you can click on *9. All right, so we will be using a new link to Poll Everywhere. So this room is www.pollev.com/kwpoll2. So pollev.com/kwpoll2. That link should be in your chat box. You can copy and paste it into your browser. The browser is Chrome or Explorer, any other browser that you use. You can also text the number in to 22333 KWPoll2. And as a reminder, we're taking phone-only interpretation, and then also the same input the way we are in other breakout rooms too. We're just also accommodating phone-only users as well. So we are going to go into, in a minute, to our first question. But I wanted to let you know we'll have 10 questions in total. We'll spend 5 to 6 on each question, 5 to 6 minutes on each question. I'll let you know when there's 1 or 2 answers left, 1 to 2 minutes left. And I want you to take your time in crafting responses to the questions. There'll be time to see what other people have responded with. And to help participants and myself to readily view your responses, we're requesting that you limit your response to a sentence with your key views. You can share more than 1 response, but you'll see as we get to the next screen, we have some scrolling text, and if it's more than a sentence, it's more difficult to read. There's also the public input questionnaire for longer responses if you'd like to use that as well. And as a reminder too, if you don't see your response on the screen, or if I don't read it out loud, it's because we're getting a lot of responses in. It's all captured. It's all can be seen by our team and will be included in the summary. There's just a limited number we could see on the screen. Okay, so let's move on to our first section here. There'll be 5 questions in this section. So the first segment is regional interests and current efforts. So regional interests and current efforts. Our first question is thinking about biodiversity in the region. What species, habitats, or places are important to protect? And as a reminder, you don't have to use the underscore to respond here. So I see a couple responses coming in. Habitat linkages between protected lands, like Santa Ana to the Palomar Mountains. Marine protected areas, I see wetlands. And again, if you're a phone call-in user, you can dial *9 to provide your response verbally as well. Vernal pools and associated listed species, eelgrass, white sea bass, mountain lion connectivity. Thinking about biodiversity, what species, habitats, or places are important to protect? The peninsula bighorn sheep, rocky reefs, coastal sage scrub, the chaparral, montane forests, La Jolla Cove, the coastal lagoons. Seeing connectivity here, the Palomar to Borrego linkage, coastal wetlands, migratory birds, bass species, wildlife linkages. Seeing that coming through strongly here, the lagoons, working lands, butterfly habitat, Rancho Jamul Ecological Preserve, San Isabel Valley, wetland restoration in Mission Bay, kelp as well. Sardines, anchovies, squid, Proctor Valley. All right, coastal sage scrub. So I'm seeing some great themes come in. The connectivity, both for wildlife, wildlife linkages and connectivity between different wildlife areas. Our coastal sage scrub, wetlands, the chaparral, the abalone. Seen the bighorn sheep come in a couple times as well, the waterfowl. Okay. We'll take another minute or so on this question here. Any sensitive habitat or sensitive species covered by NCCPs? The coastal California gnatcatcher. Again, the coastal sage scrub. Connectivity between habitats. The western snowy plovers. Mount Laguna. All right, wonderful. So I'm going to move us on to our next question here. We'll have about 5 minutes for this next question. So thinking about this region, what nature-based climate solutions are important to you? So Amanda mentioned some examples in her remarks earlier that included community greening, wetland restoration, green urban jobs. So in this region, what nature-based climate solutions are important to you? So I see urban greenery, the restoration and protection of wetlands, restoration to reduce erosion, nature-based solution of local farming, adaptive management of coastal wetlands. Again, if you're a phone call-in user, star nine if you're a phone call-in user. Protecting habitat linkages, carbon sequestration, and ocean restoration, nature-based solutions. Blue carbon. I'm seeing preserving and restoring a couple times come through. Establishing protected corridors between protected places like wilderness areas. In all caps, long-term maintenance and management. So thinking about nature-based solutions that are important. Enhancing working lands, recreation management and human impacts, urban greening and urban forestry, nature-based climate solutions that are important to the region, planting water-wise plants in residential areas, protecting chaparral from repeated wildfire impacts, completion of MSCPs, water sequestration strategies, nature-based climate solutions, community farming, increasing urban tree canopies, salt marsh restorations, seaweed aquaculture for bioremediation, managed grazing to enhance biodiversity, freeway overpass for wildlife, all right, we're seeing such rich responses that are very regionalized as well, so appreciate those being sent in. So thinking about the region, what climate-based solutions are important? Planting oak and other native trees in urban areas, softer, greener shoreline protection. We have about 1 minute on this question. And if any answer that's coming in here is sparking something in you as well, and it's reminding you of another nature-based solution, definitely send that in. If we don't see it on the screen, it is still being captured. So protecting existing mature trees, coastal wetland and eelgrass mitigation banking, strategic land acquisition, including smaller stepping stone properties, agriculture soil regeneration, seen blue carbon a couple times here as well. So I'm going to move us on to our next question here. Our next question is with regard to 30 by 30 and or nature-based solutions. How can we advance equity and opportunity in this region? So we're interested to hear your views on advancing equitable access to nature and recreation. So equitable access. So lowering cost. A way to advance equity is funding for outreach programs. seeing protection as well as access to the urban canyons. Advancing equity through education, through transportation to and from outdoor spaces. Citywide, local trails and parks. So I'm seeing that connectivity for folks to local areas as well as to places in nature outside of urban areas. Increasing urban parks so that everyone can live no more than a 10-minute walk. Providing adequately sized green spaces in urbanized areas. Seeing education a few times and one response for nature-based school programs as well. In terms of cost, lowering access costs to state parks. Creating schoolyard native habitats in every school campus. How can we advance equity and opportunity in the region? Beach buses. Outreach to diverse groups of youth. Pathways for restorative business enterprises. Looking at access through distributing outdoor spaces across the whole region. See public transportation, both throughout the region and to areas of significance like the trailheads. Few responses in for economic development and job opportunities. Advancing equity through more greening in urban areas. I think that's been a strong theme coming in through this question as well. We're going to take about 2 more minutes on this question. How can we advance equity and opportunity in the region? Again, if you are on your interpretation line, you can also text in your responses and add them to the chat as well. $15 an hour living wages, giving more stewardship opportunities to Native American residents. Increasing the availability and access to alternative modes of transit. So thinking of equity, we've seen a lot of responses to transportation, electrifying buses, getting children outdoors to wildlife areas, funding from multi-languages, signage ads, so thinking for people to know how to get places. And once they're there, the interpretation. Creating green job opportunities in collaboration with the city and the state. Providing funding for youth programs oriented towards getting youth to the ocean through surfing or free diving. Okay, and reminder for folks, if you're a phone call-in user, you can press *9, I'll unmute you. Have no fear, provide your input. It's great to hear from you. Okay, I'm going to move us on to our next question. Our next question is, what is working in this region to conserve lands and/or coastal waters and implement nature-based solutions to climate change? So I want to know, and we want to know what a success story is. So it can be an existing strategy, a program, a project, initiative that you think is working well. And as you're thinking about those responses, are there goals and targets associated with them? I see marine protected areas coming in a couple times here. That activism is working well. We have our phone call-in user with a raised hand. So I'll unmute you here. You might have to push *6 on your phone after I unmute you as well. So if you're ending in 8862, press *6 on your line and you should be unmuted. What is working in this region?
I'd like to put forward the model of the Climate Science Alliance and its project as something that's working well in our region.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing that. we have that captured as well. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so I'm seeing some other notes in here: advocacy, activism, landscape scale HCPs and NCCPs, and that they have required targets. The San Diego Climate Action Plan is something that is working, that is successful, that marine protected areas increase sea life. The Native Oyster Living Shoreline Project, currently in progress by the South San Diego Bay. Blue carbon research, established conservation banks, acquisition of natural areas to protect sensitive and listed species, multi-species conservation plan for San Diego County, local NGOs, things that are working and things that are successful is conservation easements with endowments, mussel, clam, oyster reefing. Things that are working, the San Diego Climate Action Plan, I see again here. Okay. We'll take another couple answers on this question here. Grassroots efforts. I'm seeing the CAP come in strong. The Encinitas Climate Action Plan. Managed grazing, storing carbon, along with managed grazing and wildlife. San Diego's MPA Collaborative. Living shorelines for sea level rise mitigation. Community-based surveys of federal public land. Another note for marine protected areas and citywide recycling. Cities that have dark skies initiatives to save birds and educate people. And if you're hearing a dog in the background, it's my neighbor's dog. So we might be enjoying that puppy for a little bit today. Coastal wetland restoration in San Diego Bay. The Sandag Transit Ordinance. And collaboration. Seen such great responses coming through here for what is working and what is successful in the region. We appreciate all these coming through. Again, if I didn't read it out loud, we are capturing it. If you've called in and said it verbally, we've captured it as well. Anza Borrego Desert Foundation and NGOs. Okay, I'm going to move us on to, I'm going to give us another 30 seconds for anyone who wasn't able to give their responses in, and then I'll move us on to the next question here. So access to world-class research from scripts to inform decisions and our MPAs. Okay, I'll move us on to our next question here. Okay, our next question is, what is working in the region to increase equitable access to nature and its benefits? So the last question is what is working to implement nature-based solutions, and this question is to increase equitable access to nature and its benefits. So I see NGO programs, outreach programs, what's working to increase equitable access to nature, collaboration among local, regional, state agencies and organizations, local NGO outreach, outreach programs like outdoor outreach. Some people aren't sure, but hopefully this list will be helpful as well. And again, if you're a phone call-in user, *9. Oh, looks like right as I'm saying that, we have our phone call-in user with a note on what is working to increase equitable access. So I'm going to unmute you here, 8862. Dial *6 on your end and you'll be unmuted. So what is working in this region? I think you're unmuted. Another second or so. If you're 8862, you should be unmuted. All right, we'll try you again in a minute. Hopefully you'll be back. Okay, so what's working in this region is the restoration of trails, parks, public spaces. Amanda, did you see anything come into that you wanted to note before? All right, I'm seeing such great rich responses and things that are being repeated as well. Lots of commitment from citizen volunteers and advocates. Things that are working is the need for folks to who do not have equitable access to be thoughtfully and respectfully engaged. All right. Things that are working is that there's a lot of NGO outreach programs with a few noted like Surfrider, Audubon, and others that went by before I could read them as well. What's working is educational programs, volunteer opportunities, neighborhood gardens, textured waves, things that are working to get folks equitable access to nature and its benefits, government internships in natural resources jobs. All right, let's do another minute or so on this question, and we'll move on. Another call out to groups like Water, Climate, and Science Alliance, educational outreach on local reserves, advertising of existing open space, trails, and social media. Okay, let's move on to our next question here. This next question is the last in this section. So the state of California is committed to conserving 30% of its land and coastal waters by 2030. What does conservation mean to you? So the state has not yet defined conservation in this context, and we're interested to know what you think. So thinking about earlier to Jen's presentation, what does conservation mean to you? I see acquisition, integrated watershed management, conservation meaning conservation easements. Jen described the state's approach as conserving places that protect species, that meaningfully address and protect us from the effects of climate change. I see a well-managed MPA network, mitigation, natural parks, working lands. What does conservation mean to you? Buy, restore, and manage lands on a watershed level. Keeping native and natural resources healthy and stabilized. Restoring land and sensitive areas. The question of whether 30% of the state is already protected. Human activities that help heal and sustain our natural resources. Blue carbon ecosystems prioritized to meet climate. Acquisition of land and enough funding and staff to manage that land in perpetuity. And as we're reading those, I also see Amanda taking great notes. We're also providing this everyone with the summary, but just so you know, we hear you, and these are such rich responses. Thank you for providing them. Long-lasting protection from soil disturbing development. And again, if you're a phone call-in user, *9 if you'd like to share. Protecting and preserving the land. Restoration means protection by law from development. Conservation means fishery management, sustainable access to responsible outdoor recreation. Making sure we're not loving to death the areas that we love. retaining knowledge of Native Americans and natural lands, recognizing that some human activities are detrimental to the health of natural ecosystems. Conservation meaning the protection from development, managed protected areas both individually and as a part of a network. And then conservation meaning preserving land in perpetuity, thinking about future generations. The balance of wildfire safety and chaparral management. Creating jobs. All right, we'll take another minute or so on this question. What does conservation mean to you? Access for recreation that prioritizes nature, conserving non-motorized recreation. Thinking about equity and equitable access to open spaces. Noting that recreation and conservation might not always be compatible. Stopping sprawl and insisting on smart growth. Protecting lands. Tribe managed land and ocean. No take zones in waters. All right, we have another minute or so, another couple seconds on this question. If you haven't provided a response, make sure to send that in. And we'll move on to our next question. And reminder, if you haven't seen your response, we're still getting it on Poll Everywhere. If you've texted, wrote it in on your browser window, we have it. Okay, let's move on to our next question. Our next question is in section 2, which is segment 2, which is on challenges. So regional challenges. So we would appreciate if you could describe the greatest challenge to conserving lands and coastal waters by implementing nature-based solutions to climate change. So we asked about opportunities and now challenges. I know funding is the first response, so I would ask funding for what and what type of funding. So enforcement, funding coming through strong, funding for what in particular? Balancing consumptive and conservation needs, housing shortages, compete with conservation objectives. The greatest challenges: humans, humankind, overpopulation, the high cost of acquisition for small fragmented parcels, development. So, for privileged white people, keeping with the rules, enforcement capacity. Again, if you're a phone call-in user, *9 on your phone. Greatest challenges to conserving lands or coastal waters, threat of fuels management by CAL FIRE, education with an emoji. So for funding, dedicated funding for monitoring, restoration, and enforcement. Funding specifically for project implementation. Funding for managed and enforcement in conserved lands. Land conversion, greatest challenge to conserving lands. And implementing nature-based solutions to climate change, lands and coastal waters. Funding for planning efforts. The note that developers have money to develop, but open spaces might not have money to protect. Funding for acquisition and maintenance of lands. The challenge is our current laws and regulations. So which laws and which regulations I'd ask as well. Balancing development needs with conservation needs. Lands to fight development. Disrupted sediment supply for wetlands. availability of lands or waters, invasive species limiting natural resource values. We saw the note before, humans, keeping humans from impacted lands, implementing coastal retreat, intensifying wildfire, coordination or the lack of coordination among resource management agencies, noting a challenge is the fund for restoration of properties, funding for community parks and nature spaces, challenges to conserving lands and our coastal waters and implementing nature-based solutions to climate change. Prioritizing new housing development over protection of large parcels. Misguided burning and destruction of sensitive habitat as part of a fire strategy. Funding opportunities to support research to scale and develop projects. Seeing a challenge as competing land uses, erosion with different types of agriculture, high cost of management and limited funding for maintenance. Seeing a note for altered fire regimes, that there's too much fire, that there's non-compliance in marine protected areas, that the availability of lands for parks and cities, protecting land set aside for mitigation in perpetuity, getting agreement on definition of conservation and preservation. Another note on development with money and power. That politicians might not support land protection legislation. I see another note on baseline research on ecosystem functioning, so the need for support for that and funding. Oppositional congressional representation, sprawl in the San Diego backcountry, a lack of funding for small parcels or less than 58 acres. Another note on communication and collaboration between agencies is a challenge. Fix the wildland versus fix the homes in terms of fire strategy. There are private and utility-owned wetland parcels. The challenge is the rate of change for sensitive species in land versus the need for and timing for scientific evaluation. I think fire and managed fire is a good theme that's come up through here a few times in this question in particular. The lack of science-based decisions and trail management. Short-term thinking. Another challenge of privatizing profits and socializing costs of conservation. A few notes today on sprawl and urban sprawl, housing sprawl, sprawl in East County, funding limitations, inconsistent mitigation strategies for sea level rise in coastal cities, that there are some cities that allow for armoring. Funding for habitat management and for the general public to know what that means. Seeing sea level rise again is a challenge. Managing holistically watersheds and coastal zones. Using 10-year costs versus annual budget planning. A challenge of proactive wildfire plan on conserved lands. CAL FIRE's plan to burn huge parcels of sensitive habitat. So seeing different approaches to fire strategy. Let's take another 30 seconds or so. I think we've slowed down a bit. I'll move us on to our next question. We end on managed retreat and social media. Okay, Allison, let's take us to question 6. And Allison is the web manager and tech support here. Thank you, Allison. Please describe the greatest challenges to conserving lands and coastal waters and implementing nature-based solutions to climate change. That was our last question. This question is on equity. So what are the challenges to equitable access? So we asked about what's working with equitable access. We want to know what the challenges are to equitable access. The first response here I see is nature deficit disorder. So what are barriers that need to be overcome? Private land ownership along coasts that prevents public access. A challenge is lack of access for underserved communities. And as a reminder for our phone calling users, *9 on your phone, *9 on your phone, if you would like to provide verbal comment as well. Creating nature parks in urban areas, a great challenge to increasing equitable access to nature and its benefits. I'm seeing a lack of urban greenery as a challenge, the barrier of a lack of public transportation, that there's a geosocial divide between BIPOC communities and open space, or Black, Indigenous, people of color and open space. Negative experience BIPOC community might feel in open and natural spaces. Artificial turf in parks and open spaces. A note of funding, lack of funding to provide access. A note on transportation. That there's a lack of management funds to accompany urban parks. That non-wealthy can't afford to live near the coast and that bike paths are dangerous to get there. Challenges or barriers to increasing equitable access to nature and its benefits. Helping youth and their families understand and experience benefits of nature. There are limited hours. That there might not be representation at important tables for Black, Indigenous, people of color, lack of parking, land ownership and distance for low-income communities, lack of resources for BIPOC folks, discrimination in natural spaces. Looking at transportation both as access and walkability as well. That parking is expensive. Seeing bike lanes and bikeability, bus routes. So transportation, multi-modes of transportation to get to these outdoor spaces. No opportunities for repeated exposure to nature. Looking at funding and political will. Resources. Funding to support the personnel need to manage sustainable access. Lack of green space in all neighborhoods. So the challenges to increasing equitable access to nature and its benefits. Creating nature-based jobs. I've seen parking come in as a key theme. Walking as a real transportation option. Social barriers such as language. All right, let's take another minute or so on this question. I know we've had such rich responses. Not enough support for Indigenous-led conservation efforts. Transportation, parking issues, I think that's a strong theme heard throughout. Bikeability, walkability, making city streets and sidewalks more pedestrian friendly. That there's safety in city natural areas. Lack of understanding for rules and regulations. All right. Lack of funding for establishing natural areas where people live. Recreation-oriented parks inside city and county areas. Incorporating nature and planning, or the inability to do that so far, as a challenge or barrier. So let's move on to our next question here. Our next question is on our third and final topic, regional opportunities. Got a couple questions here. So this question, what does long-term success look like for nature-based climate solutions in this region? What does long-term success look like? So I want you to think big, think long-term, think future, higher level, regional level, local level for project outcomes. So beyond contributing to climate change goals, how can nature-based climate solutions deliver on broad policy goals? So thinking big, what does long-term success look like? Well-managed and strongly enforced MPAs, an interconnected network of protected natural lands from the US-Mexico border to the Sierra Nevada. Species decline is stopped and extinction is no longer a problem. Thinking big, what does long-term success look like? Fully funded habitat restoration on conserved lands. Reliable long-term funding sources to support land management. That there's science-based management and monitoring of protected lands. And if you're just joining us, the link to the chat, the link to this poll will be put in the chat box, and it's also on the screen as well, the link and the text information. Long-term success looks like biodiversity goals are met, that there's prescribed burning, and again, thinking big, what does long-term success look like? Preserves and reserves are protected for their intended use. There's community support through stakeholder engagement. That there's a real green-blue economy, building jobs that help protect the land and ocean. The plans to weather extreme climate work for the habitat. That nature is a fundamental, integral part of most people's lives. That mountain lions can feel comfortable and safe in San Diego's backcountry. That we're not hard armoring along coastlines. There's hydrologic planning of watershed drainages that include natural flows and erosion control. So thinking big, what long-term success looks like. That there's actively managed coastal wetlands and other examples. Using proper scientific evidence to support adaptive management efforts. Long-term success, that major public transportation improves. People spend less time in their cars. There's housing in the right places. Looking at native plant palettes and native plants for landscaping. That there's an acquisition of natural open space. Long-term success looks like sustainable cities, and that San Diego's backcountry is protected. Big picture, long-term success at the regional level and at the project level as well. No more construction in the 30-foot area of sea level rise. We reduce greenhouse gas from transportation because our cities are walkable and bikeable. There's a reduction in wildfire intensity and frequency. Long-term success. Targeted science-based conservation measures. Sufficient enforcement to ensure reserves are used for designed purposes. That native plants are prioritized. We've seen that a couple times through here. Science-based management of sensitive species that responds to species ranges. There's a marine reserve expansion, that cities have climate action plans, and that they are implemented. So big picture, endangered and threatened species are fully protected. Sustainable nature-based climate solutions will have enhanced biodiversity and ecosystems, reducing carbon. We talked a lot about connectivity before, that habitats are connected, that there are dark sky initiatives, fulfillment of tree canopy strategies and climate action plans. So long-term success, what does long-term success look like? That there's green stormwater infrastructure. Fire management focuses on hardening houses and roadways rather than removing nature, wildlife. Long-term big picture success looking like an increase in marine protected areas. Climate action adaptation plans include blue carbon. Thinking about the economy, that there are green jobs created, less gas-powered vehicles on the road, that there's easy access to nature, climate-smart agricultural practices storing carbon, that we're using long-term local monitoring databases, that there are beach buses, that was noted before as well. Long-term success, big picture success, that all housing is electrified instead of using gas. Everyone understands the importance of preserving natural habitats and species. That development is prioritized around job centers. And there's coordination, communication between jurisdictions on climate action plans. Let's take another minute or so on this question and we'll move on to the next. Okay, all neighborhoods have access to green space, parks, and preserves. And solar energy is local and not placed in natural environments. That all levels of government work together, and that rooftop solar gets good funding, so there's no more industrial scale renewables that harm habitats. That students in school regularly participate in hands-on restoration and learning in their local habitats. We're getting such robust responses. We really appreciate the thought that everyone is putting into these as well. Thank you so much. Let's move on to our last question here. What does success look like for 30 by 30? What does success look like for 30 by 30? What do you hope has happened in your region? So this could be big picture, higher regional level, or project specific. What success looks like for 30 by 30. And for our phone call-in users, *9 on your phone. So I'm seeing success for 30 by 30 looks like there's expanded marine protection areas, that there's bipartisan participation and support, that not only are the marine protected areas expanded, but they're strongly managed, that there's 30% of state coastal waters as marine protected areas. It's a good note on the MPAs, marine protected areas. that wildlife habitats are connected, that there's funding for implementation of a plan, increased equitable opportunities to experience outdoor spaces, that there's science and scientific understanding behind the biodiversity that we're looking at, adaptive management of coastal wetlands. What does success look like for 30 by 30? And again, if you're a phone call-in user, you can raise your hand as well. The MSCPs are completed and enforced, that we're set up for 50 by 50. So from 30 by 30 to 50 by 50, that the backcountry is protected. There's an integrity of reserves and preserves. Blue carbon and natural systems are restored and enhanced, that there's equitable access to coasts and green spaces, that there's conservation of working lands. I cannot get this dog quiet, so I just appreciate everyone's just patience with our working from home life. I assume many of us are home as well. But that dog is just killing me here. All right, development of restorative agricultural paths. There are significant large tracts of public land that are federally and monitored by the state as well. Continued to expand protected spaces, even if we reach 30% early. Success for 30 by 30, looking like pride in the natural landscape of San Diego and the region. Success for 30 by 30, looking like conservation easements on large San Diego ranches and compatible grazing programs. Science is used to determine ecological potential of different areas. There's the protection of Rancho Gajito. Our lagoons and waterways, streams are restored and permanently protected. Another note that we can begin working on 50 by 50. Let's take another minute or so on what does success look like for 30 by 30. That there's adequate funding to manage what is already conserved. That all of our parks and preserves are preserved as well. Seeing a note for conservation jobs. So lots of jobs in conservation. That Mission Bay is a protected wetland. That there's close interaction between state policy and the Biden administration. That San Diego shares our innovative conservation programs and associated monitoring and management. That there's funding for local parks like the Oak Riparian Park and El Corazon in Oceanside. That other local lakes and parks have proper funding as well as open access. That the public is supportive of and cherishes its natural areas. Success for 30 by 30, looking like realistic, sustainable funding for proper management for what is already conserved. That California is known for achieving its 30 by 30 goal. That we have realistic funding. That there are overcrossings and undercrossings for wildlife in the region. The success look like for 30 by 30. These are such great responses here. And as the last few come in, just a reminder, if you've sent yours in and you haven't seen me read it, we still have it captured in Poll Everywhere. That California is the template for other states. That fisheries are monitored and sustainable. That there's mountain lion crossings over the freeway. That water quality is improved. Wonderful. All right, so I'll move us on to our closing here. I wanted to thank everyone for sharing your ideas and experiences during today's meeting. There were such rich responses, so many focused on the region. I wanted to remind everyone that today's workshop has been recorded. It will be available online at www.californianature.ca.gov. We'll be posting the meeting summaries with non-attributable comments captured during these meetings. You can also provide feedback on today's experience by completing a post-workshop evaluation that will be emailed to you. And we invite you to stay connected by visiting our website, www.californianature.ca.gov. You can provide additional written comments through the public input questionnaire. You can sign up to attend a future event on the website, and it will be entered in the chat as well. There are many opportunities to provide input. You can do it through mail. So if you'd like to write a letter or a postcard, you can send that in. You can write an email as well. You can also leave a voicemail. So we have many ways to receive your input as part of that. And that information, Ali, if we can get that into the chat as well, And we, again, you can also do the public input questionnaire and sign up to attend one of the future events. I want to thank you all again. I'm going to turn it over to Amanda for any final words. Amanda?
Thanks. I just want to express my appreciation for the really thoughtful and sort of solution-oriented responses that were shared with us tonight. This input is extremely helpful and valuable. Some real sort of key themes have emerged. It always helps me to take notes, so I did take notes, but I look forward to looking through all of the responses that are captured through the Poll Everywhere system. So I know everyone's super busy and it's a 2-hour block, and we just really appreciate your contribution to this effort. So excited to see how this gets incorporated into the work that we're driving on at the state level. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Amanda. And for all of you joining us today, the meeting is over. We'll be ending this room here. You can exit the meeting by clicking on Leave Meeting at the bottom of your screen. You can also click the X at the top of your screen, or if you're on your phone, you can hang up as well. Thank you again for joining us, and good night.